She's been serving homeschoolers since 1989 and actually is a second-generation homeschool mom. So all of her children have homeschooled and have graduated, and she'll be telling you more about her expertise that she brings. Arham from the United Arab Emirates. He is a homeschool grad with a wide array of experiences, culminating with his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science. So currently he is teaching online history, and he coached in Abu Dhabi a History B and Bowl team to gold medal success. He himself was a 2016 History B gold medalist. Bev Huebner from Canada is a veteran home educator of 2 children, and she served with her husband on the Manitoba Association of Christian Homeschoolers for 35 years. Welcome, Bev. Uzma Akser of UK, she's the founder of coaching and consulting firm, and she's an executive leadership coach, neurodiversity consultant, and certified autism specialist. She has her LLB and postgraduate degree in legal practice. Peggy Ployhar of the United States is founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, with years of experience helping homeschool families meet the needs of neurodivergent children. Follow Peggy as host of the podcast, Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Welcome to our speakers. Jenn, we'll start with you.
Ooh, thank you very much. So, hello, I'm Jenn. I'm from the UK, about 4 hours drive from here, so not travelled quite as far as many. As I've been introduced, I'm a CEO of an alternative education provision which caters mostly for home educators, but also young people who are in school and struggling. So to start off with, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergent. Neurodiversity simply means that we all think, feel, learn and experience the world in different ways, and it really can be put as simply as that. Neurodivergent is the idea that there's a normal and you are not it. We're going to talk a little bit about that phrase really, because it has its uses, but it's also maybe needs a bit of change over time. So, neurodivergence. It's not a new concept. This is coming up a lot in social media and in the news, that suddenly there's this big rise in neurodivergence. This is not the case. This has always been here. It is a fabric of humanity. But it is rising to the surface more as we become more interconnected, as we talk more across social media, and as, in fact, our mainstream education is not meeting the needs of neurodivergent people more and more. There's more and more problems, so more and more people are talking about it. There is no typical. I don't believe there is a typical. I don't believe there's a normal, and we are still figuring it out. So as time goes on, I think we're going to be redefining the language we use around this, and I think we're also going to be redefining the percentages of people, because as time goes on, whereas we used to, for example, see autism as young people or people with very high needs, we're now able to see that actually you can have quite low support needs and definitely still very much have an autistic experience. It's essential. We need neurodivergence. We need all the different brains that we have in our society. Some of our greatest scientists, artists, creatives, explorers, revolutionary thinkers, entrepreneurs would be classed as neurodivergent, so it's essential. It doesn't need fixing. And as I said, neurodivergence is useful language at the moment, but one hopefully will change as time goes on. Schools and neurodiversity. In school, and this is a bit of a generalism, but young people are expected to learn in one way, in one environment, on demand. That's generally how the concept of a school works. But unfortunately, that doesn't work for everybody. So one size doesn't really suit anybody. Somebody's always going to be missing out in that. So the results of neurodivergent people in school is this. We see masking, which is lots and lots of young people who go home and really struggle, and parents say, oh, there's problems, and the school go, well, there's no problems here, and you go, yeah, that's because they're pretending, they're covering it up, and they're coming home and they're not coping, they're having outbursts, they're hiding under the duvet for hours on end, they're not striking. Emotional dysregulation, which we see in schools and we see at home, emotional outbursts, upset, overwhelm, a feeling of just everything being far too much, leading to shutdown, where we're not able to have conversations, we're not able to have dialogue because somebody is so stressed, their nervous system has been under so much pressure, and eventually leading to burnout. So, home education. It's not an instant solution. If you make the decision to home educate, you're not going to take your neurodivergent young person out of school and day one they're going to be jumping around and skipping and going, yeah, this is fantastic. Please pass me that English book. I'm going to sit here and study studiously because I'm suddenly at home. But I very much believe it is the key. So, when you are home educating your neurodivergent young person that you've taken out of school, the key thing is to act. So make a change. If they're in school and they're struggling, take them out of school. If you have been at home for however long, weeks, months, years, and you are struggling, they are struggling, make a change now. Don't delay. Your young person is communicating to you. If they're not happy, if things are not right, act straight away. Identify needs, and this is really key. I personally believe that neurodivergence, neurotypical, however you look at it, we're all human beings. We all just need we need our needs met. And very much so, this is where to start. You need to listen. You need to observe. You need to have conversations in whatever way you need to gain the information of what support they need. And usually it's really basic. We need to feel safe. We need to have space to decompress. We need to be free of stress and pressures so we can settle, our nervous system can settle, and we can begin our journey through life and break the cycle. So once you've identified those needs, you really need to, again, act on it. So if you've identified that your young person really doesn't do well with lots of crowds of people, stop dragging them along to the library, to a lovely home ed learning group when there is 30 children running around talking, because your young person has told you that that's not meeting their needs. So just because they're not in school, you need to still break those same cycles, because the danger is you can just keep repeating them. And then empower and support. Your young person needs to learn and know how to function in the adult world. Okay, that's the whole point of childhood. It's learning how to be an adult, really, isn't it? So you need to empower your young person through those conversations, helping them develop strategies. If you don't know what strategies to use, then read, talk, connect. Connect with all the people here that are running businesses and coaching and organisations. Talk to people at your local home education groups. Talk to your young person, and then support them to do it. So if your young person perhaps really struggles with talking to people, then maybe you'll take a small step. Maybe you'll take a small step that you'll go together when you go to the grocery store, and you will converse with the shopkeeper, and they will stand by you, and then the next time they might kind of say something, say hi, just support them to gradually do it. Just because they're 15 or 16 doesn't mean they're automatically going to have the same level of skills in those areas that you would expect. So just support. Turn those struggles into superpowers. This is my family, by the way, looking a bit crazy. Heightened senses will turn into empathic, artistic, and observant individuals. Hyperfocus will become experts in their fields. Turbo brains can become creative problem solvers. And impulsivity can lead to learning opportunities and cooperation. And to finish, I'd like to introduce you to someone. So this individual, who I'm going to show you a photo of in a minute, is 14 years old in the picture. They were undiagnosed dyslexic. They were told they must try to focus and do their best work. Undiagnosed ADHD, they must stop talking and sit still. Over 20,000 more negative comments received than neurotypical peers of that age. School made her feel unintelligent. School didn't recognise her skills. So much potential, but no support. She believed she was broken, had a lifetime of negative self-beliefs, or went on to struggle with relationships, finance, and employment. And this is me at 14. 41 years it took me to be diagnosed. It then took a further 3 years to really start to understand myself and be able to put things in practice and make changes. And right now I have young people who are 16, getting quite emotional, 16, 15, 11 and 9. And because it took me so long to be diagnosed, even though my young people have always been home educated, I am still having to do a lot of work with them now to undo some of the damage that's happened, even through being home educated, because they were all undiagnosed neurodivergents. So, act now, identify needs, stop the cycle, empower and support. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Jen. Thank you. She took some of what I was going to say, so I'll shorten it a little bit. Just to give you a little background on myself, I at the age of 21, I was teaching and I was in charge of the gifted program and had a lot of twice gifted students. And that's where my heart began to break for neurodiverse children. I had gifted kids that were extremely dysgraphia, dyslexia, you name it, and incredibly gifted, but they didn't know it. And that's when I realized everybody's gifted, right? So we might have a gifted program, but everybody has gifts. And when we put our students in a place where they have to learn one way, they begin to think they're stupid. And that's what broke my heart, is seeing these young people coming through high school already defeated, and even meeting adults already defeated because they'd spent their life thinking, I'm stupid because I can't do what's happening in school. So I ended up going on to studying neuroscience and pursued a master's in neuroscience because for a lot of reasons, but part of it was related to this passion for kids. And I want to tie a little bit of this, kind of open this discussion up so that as you listen to these different comments, especially what we just heard from Jen, I want to explain the neuroscience behind those emotions and how those can affect how we can think about ourselves and how they can become so rock solid, as Jen was talking about. So I'm going to first start with the reticular activating system. This is a very small part of top of our brain stem, but it is in charge of focus. It is in charge of taking us to where we say things are important, and it responds to what we tell it. So if we've decided that, I don't know, let's pick something simple. White cars are the thing, right? Or we've just bought a white car maybe, and now all of a sudden when you drive down the road, you see white cars everywhere. You never really noticed them before. That's your reticular activating system, because suddenly that has become important to you. And it controls our focus. So what we tell it, it's going to look for. It's going to look to prove that. So as we think about that first slide, when you ask a fish to climb a tree, it spends its life thinking it's stupid. When that individual gets into a classroom or into a situation where they're feeling defeated, their reticular activating system begins to look for all those occasions where they're a failure. And that's what it begins to see. And it's really designed to get rid of any junk. So whatever it thinks is not important, it filters out. So how many of you have read this slide? How many of you noticed the duplicates? One or two of you. Okay, so generally your reticular activating system will filter that out. It filters out the junk and takes you towards what you have told it is important. On this next slide, I want you to just, because I think this is so important for us to understand with our young people, I want you to just keep an eye on the screen and take you a quick test.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 30.
How many got that right?
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Totally missed it, right? It's easy to miss something you're not looking for. And so even as parents, there are times when we start to see our kids in a certain light, and we begin to see that over and over and over again. And we can be we could be the problem for our kids if we're not recognizing those strengths. And so it is so important to understand the strengths of who they are and how they have been designed, so that that's what we're looking for. And we're not missing those positives because we're busy on the negatives. I'm going to skip this because they've took away some of my time. Maybe I will skip it. So why is this important? I want to just tie it to our emotional center, the limbic system, and the amygdala is where all information is filtered through, and it's the emotional center of our brain. And it is designed really to be constantly looking out for threats. And it's the part of our brain that decides whether we're going to fight, flight, or freeze. And what happens is when that emotional center is aroused, there's an equal disarousal in our prefrontal cortex, which is how we make decisions, how we analyze information. It's also our executive function. And that limbic system is heightened, especially for people with autism and ADHD, but especially when a student is a child or ourselves are starting to feel inadequate. We get into a situation where we feel inadequate and our emotional system rises, and actually it overrides our ability to think. And so when our kids are living in this world, like Jenn was saying, where people are not supporting, not noticing strengths, not coming around them and helping them see that, their emotional center is constantly on the rise. They're constantly feeling threatened and they cannot learn. And so we need to be certain that we're helping them see their strengths, giving them situations where they're not feeling that threat response so that they can see their own strengths, so that their prefrontal cortex can function and they can feel empowered and strong and capable, because they have been designed the way they're designed for a reason. There's a purpose for our kids. And when they're under this, and when we as parents start to feel that same stress, these are some of the body's reactions especially. So that's why I believe we're seeing such a rise in mental health issues right now as well, because our brain is responding to this constant threat. Especially our kids, as they're being constantly bombarded with messages and these feelings of inadequacy. I just want to give you this quick analogy. This is actually the first suspension bridge that was built between U.S. and Canada. And I'll have to tell this at 100 miles an hour. So they were trying to create the suspension bridge at the tightest spot on the Niagara River with the most rushing water. They couldn't take a boat across. They had to figure out how to start this bridge. And so they ended up running I'll skip to the end to the one that worked. They ended up running an archery contest to see who could shoot an arrow across that span and get to the other side. And it took 2 days, and finally a Canadian boy at the age of 16 fired the arrow. It got across the other side. And to that little string that was attached to his arrow, they tied a thicker string, and they pulled it across, tied a thicker string, pulled it across, back and forth, until they could get a band of steel that would begin the construction on this suspension bridge. And that's how our brains work. As we feed information, as we begin to believe something, as we accept things as truth, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger until we build a neural pathway that is a band of steel. And for our neurodiverse kids, we want that band of steel to be their strengths. We don't want that band of steel to be a sense of defeat. So my favorite proverb, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Help your kids guard their heart on what they're accepting, not just from the world, but about themselves, because it does determine the course of their life. Quick end. Grab that QR code. I have a whole series of white papers on neurodiversity, different types of neurodiversity, what are their strengths, what are their challenges and strategies. So if you grab that, sign up, and I'll deliver those to you via email. The first one will be this guide for homeschooling parents. Thank you.
Morning. Just see my slides. Sorry. All right, we got it. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's panel. I'm so excited to be here. First off, a little about me. I know Jan gave a very nice introduction, but I thought I'd just go a little bit more in detail for my session. So this is my home education and how it's impacted my education and career. So I am a home education and autism advocate. I hold a bachelor's degree in political science. I graduated last year. I'm currently working as a self-employed history teacher, and I've spoken at numerous inclusion conferences at NYU Abu Dhabi in 2023 and 2024. And I've also been a participant and a volunteer at the 2019 Special Olympics in Abu Dhabi. And probably one of my finest moments is being part of a History Being Bold team that took home the gold medals in both in Italy, Germany, and Hong Kong. So those were some exciting times. Let's see. Right. So in my early years, I was faced with a lot of educational challenges. I went to school like everyone else up until grade 4, because I faced numerous challenges with either rigid teaching methods or lack of focus from teachers, and it mostly accumulated from the bullying I experienced at school. And it's because of that I struggled immensely, mainly in subjects like math and social studies as well. And this event also resulted in a heavy burden on the handwriting bits as well. I'm not a righty, and I foresee that I will never be a righty. I'm a lefty all the way. So it's because of these that eventually pivoted my path towards home education, homeschooling as a whole. Thanks to the efforts of my mom. I found that throughout the 8 years of homeschooling, it has accumulated for me plenty of rewards. I started home education when I was 10 years old by starting with grade 5. And then working my way with homeschooling resulted in me adopting a flexible study schedule. And it allowed me to focus on my strength areas like reading books, learning about history, and reading more comprehensive literature and vocab to an extent. And it also resulted in me participating in fun learning activities, a lot of outdoor things. We, did stuff like kayaking, meeting at parks, etc. And my weak points, like math and social studies, were taken with easier syllabi. So I was stuck doing more basic math, and eventually, I unknowingly started doing advanced stuff by the time I was in 7th grade. And so I also competed in history competitions around the world, absolutely great times. And I found out that throughout the years that home education helped in my personality development, which is why I'm here speaking today. And so, in conclusion, I would say that there are a lot of benefits to homeschooling and home education. First of all, supportive family is invaluable. You never know on how much they can mean a lot to you when they have your support in the corner. And the home education principles should not be compromised. Flexibility with time management. And I honestly found this one to be really, struck a chord with me. Play to your strengths, because that's what is most often overlooked with neurodivergent students, is that the strongest areas are overlooked in favor of their weaker areas, and it results them in not being, playing to their fullest potential. And this is a personal opinion of mine, but reading really helps. Any sort of literature, I encompass everything from like comprehensive literature to the news, etc. And, as I said, to play into your strengths, it's also important to focus on development instead of completing courses. There's a lot about yourself that you can, uncover about. You've never really truly fully tapped your full potential unless you've really focused on yourself. And the last point I would say would be to, remain aware and to acknowledge the milestones that you made, because you never know on how much they really have had an impact on your life, especially with the people that propelled you forward in that direction. And that's it. Thank you.
I'm not sure I can compete with some of these talks. I am the mom of a homeschool neurodivergent child. Though that's a word I probably hadn't really interacted with much until we planned this workshop, because I'm talking from 1986. We have a son who showed developmental delays very early. He didn't sit until he was like 8 months. He didn't walk till he was 1.5 years. He didn't talk till he was 3.5. It was like I had an older daughter that hit all the milestones right away. Like she did wonderfully. And then I have this son that's not hitting the milestones. And we had him assessed at 2.5. And basically they said, yeah, there's some delays, but it's not bad enough to do anything about. So I went on with raising my children. And there is no such thing as homeschooling back then. Nobody knew about it. If you've talked to Jan or to Zan, back in those days, we had never heard of homeschooling. So we sent our daughter off to kindergarten, and I stayed home and worked with my son and encouraged him in play and different things. And then in spring, they were doing hearing tests at the school for the kindergartners in preparation for grade 1. And I happened to be there with my son while my 5-year-old was getting her ears tested. And the man says, I got some time. Do you want me to test your baby too? He flatlined. Means that there was no reaction on his eardrums. So I made an appointment with a pediatrician, and of course he did the test and it was flatlined. So he sent us on to the specialist. Turned out he had huge adenoids at the back of his neck that were blocking his eustachian tube, and there was no equalization of pressure. So he couldn't hear. No wonder he only had 5 words. So at 3.5, he had surgery, and within 6 weeks he was talking, because now he could hear. And I'm going, oh, well, maybe there's not so many problems with this boy. But sometimes you got to watch out for those physical disabilities that can get hidden by a neurological disability. We were fortunate in that we could fix that one, but it didn't mean it fixed him. He still had issues. So that spring, a friend of ours heard her talk about homeschooling, and she bought a book. And she lent it to us because she knew we were considering maybe delaying his school entry for a year to give him a chance to catch up, right? And we read the book, both of us, my husband and I both. And then we bought another book and another book. And we started talking about this idea of home education. And so now you're going to rush me. So we chose to home educate our children. And since we were going to do it with our son, we might as well do it with our daughter. So we home educated. And we helped our son progress at his rate. And we used curriculum that worked for him. One of the really big things that we learned about him was that he is auditory. And we lucked out because I bought a phonics program on cassette tapes, and I would put them in the cassette player and set it out by the sandbox, and he would listen to them over and over and over and over again, which apparently is his way of learning, is lots of repetition. And I read books out loud to them over and over. And you know those little comprehension workbooks where they read a little story and then they answer the questions? If I would give that to him to read and answer the questions, he'd get 2 right out of the 10. If I read that story to him, he could answer all the questions just like that. He was totally auditory. His visual intake was not near what his auditory intake was. So I was fortunate in that I discovered all these things because there were no helps for us in those days. Like, it was really, like, words like autism were only reserved for the very profoundly handicapped children. There was no such thing as a spectrum. So I had blamed most of his disabilities on the fact that when he was born, the cord was wrapped around his neck twice. And I thought, he's got oxygen deprivation. That has affected his brain and his motor skills, because he struggled with fine motor skills, gross motor skills. But to get to the end of the story, because we home educated, I could spend that time with him. He never got labeled. He never got bullied. We were in a small homeschool co-op group where other boys just took him the way he was. And like, he as a child and even as a teenager, he didn't know that he was a struggling learner. He knew there were some things that he didn't get, but he knew that other people didn't get stuff too. So he has a very, very high self-esteem, which I am completely attributing to home education. Our son graduated high school from our homeschool, went to Austria for Bible school with another friend, but not with an adult, like just two 18-year-olds, we sent them off. He had a part-time job from the time he was 16, learned to work. He works really well in a situation where you teach him exactly what he has to do, and he will do it exactly the way he was taught. He will not get lazy and try and do it easier or not as well. He will do it exactly the way he was taught. So he actually ended up in manufacturing. He does a job that I could not do for more than 2 days. And he does it every day, and he loves going to work. And he has made friends at work. He has worked in the same place for almost 15 years. He has bought a house. He drives a car. He still has some social issues. Like his communication is very one-sided. Like, he has his niche ideas that he likes to pursue. Right now it's hockey and cooking. So I have things to talk to him about because he comes to my house and we cook. And neither my husband or I like hockey, but we look up the scores so we can have an intelligent conversation with him. But he's still single. He's 40 years old and he's single because his social skills, the one thing I really feel that homeschooling helped him with the most is that he never stopped learning. Just because he graduated high school, he tried one semester of college, but he realized very early in that this wasn't working for him. But he has a life that he enjoys. He's a contributing member of society. He has continued to grow and learn, and his social skills have improved. He is now hanging out with a young lady. We'll see where that goes, but it's very early. But we look forward to seeing what God has planned for him in the future. And I'm just so thankful that I got to be his mom and I got to spend time with him. By the way, our daughter did wonderful. She has 4 children. The oldest just graduated homeschool. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm a mum to 4 wonderful boys, 3 here in the audience. One's too young to be here. The minute he hears me talking, he'll start conversing. So today I really want to share my journey not only as a mother, but also as a professional who has turned a personal passion into a mission to educate others through training and coaching about neurodiversity. That's a little bit about me there. So our journey began when we learned that our son was on the autism spectrum. Like many parents, we faced a whirlwind of emotions, from uncertainty to, we got this, we can do this, we can support him, we're enough for him. After enrolling my son into school, we soon realized that traditional schooling just wasn't enough for him. It didn't cater his needs, his interests, and we very early decided that we're going to now take him out and homeschool him because we just thought the challenges are too much at school for him. So we embraced home education, a decision that changed our lives for the better. Home education allowed us to fuel his passion and create a tailored learning experience that we could really hone into for him and support him. There were many reasons, actually, we homeschooled. When we tried the schooling system, he regularly got bullied. The teachers would come to me and complain about his behavior, the challenges that he was facing. They just didn't get him. They didn't understand him at school. So we decided enough is enough, and we're going to pull him out, and that's it. He had regular meltdowns. He felt exhausted at the end of the day. And when he came home, he just wanted to literally collapse and not talk to anyone and follow any instructions. So during mid-year of his grade, I guess KG2 grade 1, when he was 6, we pulled him out, got excited. I converted the spare room in the house as a schoolroom. And I called him in one day and I said, come on, let's do some learning today. And he literally looked at me and screamed in my face. And he's there now smiling. And I cried because I had really, really put a lot of effort into creating this homeschooling room, researched all the curriculums. I was going to do Montessori. I had a whiteboard. I was ready for this. And I asked him, well, what do you want to do? He said, I just want to play. So I allowed him. I said, okay, go off and play. And for the first 2 weeks of homeschooling journey, he literally spent the whole 2 weeks cutting out cardboard boxes and making robots. And he was happy. He was thriving. That's when I decided, okay, we're going to follow his passion. And we decided to take, we decided for him to take the lead, right? We met him where he was. And his interests were here, vacuum cleaners. He loved tech, but it was the vacuum cleaners where the passion and the love for tech started. He wouldn't play with the vacuum cleaners in a typical way. He would pull the vacuum cleaner, the parts out, put them back in, pull them back out, put them back in. And he was very young, and he would say, Talha fix it, Talha fix it. And he would never get nervous about breaking the vacuum cleaners and putting them back again. And that's what I loved. He was just absolutely in his element. And that showed me that passion-led learning is what he needs, and we just need to hone into it as parents. So here, Talha is busy. So imagine a child whose eyes sparkle with joy every time he achieves something, or even when he simply tries. This is the beauty of personalized education. It's not just about academic success. It's about instilling a love for learning, building confidence, and nurturing a happy, motivated individual. As a mother, I became extremely connected to his learning journey. We worked on, life skills. We worked on communication, emotional regulation, executive functioning, and many others. And this it didn't just become a home education journey for us. It was more of a holistic approach that we took to his learning journey, which was driven by empathy, understanding, and a deep connection with my child. So we did follow his lead, and we really did dive into this passion, and the passion was tech, of course. We took a holistic approach, we followed his interests, we supported him with his flexible schedules, we provided time where he could think and process information he was learning, and that was something he didn't get at school. We asked for a sensory break at school, and we were told he wasn't allowed one. So at home now, he knows when it's time out, it's time out. He can go think, he can go process what he's learned, he can go relax and come back and do his work. We spend a lot of time interacting and engaging. He's always busy finding things in the house. He created a terrarium recently, went out for a walk, picked up some moss and other bits and pieces and made this terrarium. And now wants to sell it, right? He wants to make a business out of it. And he finds balloons, puts rice in the balloons, makes stress balls. He does a lot of different things, and we always talk about it, spend time together. And it's so much fun being together and home educating him. So there's his schedule that he follows. These are pretty old actually. He has now moved on to tech. He has everything on his laptop. He has apps that he's following with his schedule on there. And following a strict routine with his learning and break time and exercise. So these strategies have really helped us create a supportive and enriching learning environment which tailored specifically to his needs. So this, call it a passion or an obsession, whatever you want today, experience sparked a deep passion within me. I realized that other parents, educators, and even corporate leaders needed to understand the profound impact of embracing neurodiversity. This is where my next journey began. I spent 10 years advocating for him, and later I realized I want to do more. I just don't want to be staying at home, working with my children. I want to really support the community at large. So I decided to take this opportunity and create my own company. And we offer coaching and training where we raise awareness and cultivate understanding and inspire acceptance of neurodiversity in all areas of society. This company was built from my experience and I guess a lack of support that I had as a parent. And now here I am wanting to support, even if it's that one parent who can benefit. So for me, neurodiversity isn't just a concept. It's a reality that enriches our lives. When we break down our fears, biases, and barriers, we create environments where everyone can thrive. So as a coach, I work with educators to help them recognize and harness the potential of every student. I work with corporate organizations to create inclusive workplaces that value diversity in all its forms and more. So I believe the coaching principles can apply in your home environment too as an educator. It's really asking those powerful questions. Why does this interest you? What would you want to learn next? How do you want to do it? This is really important as a parent to ask those open-ended questions, as a coach, as a parent, to really harness into their experience. And I'm speeding up now because I see that red sign. Last story, very quick, promise. He's my 8-year-old and he's a creative buddy. And he'll always say to me, let me play and then I'll come to work. Allow me to be creative and then I'll do some work. And this is what we do, we just follow his lead. My 12-year-old, like every 12-year-old, loves to game. So we changed his passion into creating a YouTube channel. And he does a lot of research now, he does editing, and various other things with his YouTube channel. So really it's important to hone into their interests. And he loves 3D, 3D modeling? 3D modeling. So really for me as a home educator, I turned their learning into project-based learning. Talha, who's now 14, when he was 10, he would push and push and push and say, I want to build my own PC. So we said, okay, we can do that. But can you go off and do your research, find out how much the parts are going to, cost, feedback to me, and then we go out to a mall, we buy those pieces for you and parts and put them together. So he did. He went out, he bought the parts for the PC. Some he wasn't, some were not available. And then he ordered them online, put them all together, connected that PC, and guess what? It was working. And he was 12 at the time. He was 12. And that spark of joy in his eyes was just, I can't even describe it. It was just amazing. So really my point today, and I had a lot more to say, but I will stop, is just meet your child where they're at, harness their interest, follow the lead, follow their lead, and just support them and be their coach, be their advocate, and you can see the wonderful things that they do. It really is. It's amazing. And I think neurodiversity is obviously, a very new concept. Let's harness it, because every single person here is different. We all learn differently. We all have learning styles that are different. Let's be there to support one another and respect everyone, despite the challenges that they may be facing. Thank you so much.
So my talk's going to take a little bit of a turn here, and we're going to go practical. So I'm going to talk about ways that you can customize anything that is, anything, to turn it into curriculum. So, which is really important when we have children who learn differently, because the biggest question that I've gotten as being a consultant for over 20 years is, what curriculum is perfect for my child? And I'll look at the parent and say, I don't know, because I don't know your child. And I don't know what you have, but you can make it work. So I'm going to show you how you can make it work. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about that box, that curriculum box. So, statistically, 70% of children can contort themselves into a neurological pattern to fit any curriculum. So what it means is a curriculum, when it's developed, is made to fit a child of a particular learning. When a curriculum developer creates a curriculum, they have a particular child in mind. In order to create that curriculum correctly, they have to do that. So 70% of kids can contort themselves into that box. The other 30% have some sort of limb sticking out. Does that help you picture that? And some have multiple limbs sticking out of that box. You have to figure out a way to build that box around that limb, because that limb is not going to fit in the box, okay? So how do we do that? Well, one of the things that I've learned with my kids is that a lot of times I have really great content I can find at the library free, or something that somebody gives me that I'd really love to teach my kids about, but if I read it verbatim, they would like gloss over, be upside down, their feet would be in the air, their head would be on the ground, and they wouldn't learn anything from it. But if I took the time to pre-read it, to highlight what was most important, and I put it in the language of our family, of how we naturally talked, and put it in front of me at the table, and while we were having lunch or while we were having breakfast, had a conversation about the content, not read it verbatim, I could use that as curriculum. So think about that. There's ways that you communicate with your child that just come very natural. It's received and it's given. And you can take any content like that and turn it into curriculum. The other one is bring content to life. And I know a lot of people talk about this, but I'm going to give you a general list about how you can bring content to life. Maybe there'll be a few new things in there that you've never thought about before. Videos. YouTube. YouTube is amazing. My husband learned how to run a gas line in our cabin. I wasn't sure I wanted to enter that cabin right away, but it hasn't blown up yet. So, but you can learn a plethora of things. Of course, always, pre-watch. There's people out there that, want to give your kids bad content. So make sure you watch through it. But also, living books. I didn't realize I loved history till I read living books. Field trips. Visit historic places. Make things come to life. Make history real. Do experiments. Debate about things. Sing. Act. Sometimes when we got to some things in history that my kids didn't understand, I'm like, okay, get up. You are this person. You are that person. Let's act it out. And all of a sudden, this content came to life. Building things, brainstorming with your kids, bouncing ideas. These are things that are job skills that you can start doing in your home. Journaling, crafts, arts, creative writing, storytelling, poems. One of our favorite ways of storytelling was when we were hiking. We would have someone pick 3 things. Okay, now you tell a story with those 3 things in it while we're hiking. Of course, the kids thought the hike was a lot shorter than it was because they were too busy thinking about their stories. So, but just some ways to bring content to life. Other things you can do is you can add colors and pictures and stories and technology. So HGTV would probably not recommend a lot of these things, but I would. Put pictures on your walls, posters of things that you're talking about. Timelines are amazing. We had one whole room in one house. We've homeschooled in many houses and an RV. But we had a chalkboard. And the chalkboard was covered with things. And I didn't realize this at the very beginning. But when you have content on the walls and your kids are walking past it consistently after you've done school, they are relearning. And you don't even have to be there. So amazing things. Also consider literature, combining literature and history, science and math, making things more applicable. Why do we use these things? How have people used them in the past? And then using apps. There's so many good apps out there. And it's not just the point and click, but it's actually stuff that teaches as well. Graphic organizers, amazing, especially for kids who have executive functioning issues. There are a plethora of them out for free. Just search the internet for graphic organizers. You're going to find them. There's also graphic organizers or like apps. I had my daughter start as she got older. I'm like, okay, how are you going to organize that? And so she tried out a bunch of different apps, loaded them on her cell phone, then erased them, tried other ones until she found what fit. But there is so much out there that can help our kids. And we have to just be able to say, you know what? we don't always have to use things the way that they were given to us. And be creative yourself and teach your kids how to be creative, because that's how they learn. They learn by watching you and observing how you absorb content, how you solve problems. And that's just going to make teaching a lot easier, a lot more fun. As you can probably guess, I'm not the one that picks up a curriculum and follows it step by step. I don't even do that with a recipe. Ask my husband, because he's like, how did you make this? And you did write it down, didn't you? And most of the time it's, no, I'm sorry. Well, hope it turns out the same way next time. But anyways, if you want to hear more from me, I have a podcast team. We have a podcast called Empowering Homeschool Conversations. We're actually live on Tuesdays from 12:30 to 1:30 Central U.S. time. And if you can't join us, we actually have a newsletter where you can see who the guest is that's coming up live. You can submit your questions ahead of time. We will ask them live on air. And then you can either rewatch the YouTube video, because we broadcast it live to YouTube, Facebook, or you can listen to the podcast, which usually comes out a couple weeks after that. But my podcast team, I added the other 4 ladies on in April. And so sometimes we just have like closed discussions on some really meaty topics too. It's one of them says, we're the View for homeschoolers. So we have some pretty interesting conversations. We get really real about what is it like to be in our homes. They are all parents of struggling kids, Down syndrome, autism, intellectual disabilities. And so we cover the gamut. And then also we have a brand new platform called Homeschool Heroes. It is like a private Facebook, and I would just encourage you to join us. You can create your own groups on there. You can invite people to join you, and it's in a private place where Facebook's not going to be monitoring your discussions. Actually, I don't even see your discussions unless somebody flags it. So I just invite you to be part of our community and help us to support you. And if you run an organization, tell me how you need me to help, because that's what we're all about. We're all about connecting other organizations, other consultants, and parents, and making sure that you all find each other. So thank you.
I was so busy taking notes, I was actually sending that to a friend of mine that has some children that I think she would really enjoy and benefit from the new format. So I got distracted as a listener. So questions, what questions do you have for any of our panelists? Didn't they do a great job? So I love the stories, and I had a special needs learner myself, and I tell you, I had one child that read at 5 and one that read at 10. And if I stood them in front of you today, I say read. He read at least the first 5 lines well. And but if I stood those 2 boys in front of you today, you would not be able to tell me which was which. They both are 6 foot. One has 3 boys, one has 3 girls. They both make very good incomes and providing for their families. And I wish I'd known that when they were, 7, that God had it. It was going to be okay, that they were going to be able to be, he was going to be a fully functioning adult. And I'm just glad I didn't shoot him. Questions? Anybody have a question? Okay. Speaking of which, I know how frustrating it could be for my son. He turned into a tremendous skateboarder and had his own skateboarding business through high school. But he would go out and skateboard, and then he'd come in and say, Mom, we need to do school. And I'm like, duh, have a seat. And we would start. So it was frustrating to work with him and his demands and to be available at his call with other children in the home. How do you manage having one of these children, a special needs child, in your home with other children? Anybody?
Hello. I have a question for you first. Is he your late reader?
Oh, yes.
So,
but we focused on his strengths.
Okay.
And he had strengths,
Was he ever diagnosed with dyslexia?
What he was diagnosed in the 4th grade, we had him tested. And what she said is, all I can tell you is that what he sees is different than what you see. He ended up being the same lady came back to us after going to a conference and said, I know what's wrong with him. And I've been told since then that now it's all considered dyslexia. But
one of the interesting things about a dyslexic brain is that, and the reason I asked you that was because you said he opened a business, is that they make larger neural pathways, larger connections, less detailed connections. And that's why they think bigger, and they tend to be inventors and entrepreneurs because they can think big picture and make greater leaps between information. So when you said he was an entrepreneur, I'm thinking he has to be the one that struggled to read.
that's right.
Because it's the way that those neural connections happen. So it's exciting. For me, I had one very much like that. Needed to have it on her time, and we, as you said, we just had to adjust to her. Now hers was interesting in that she had to come back and learn at the end of the day after soccer practice, after a lot of movement, because many times the more you move your spine, the more electrical signals you're sending to your brain. And so that movement helped her to be open and ready for learning. And so for us, we're tired at the end of the day and she's ready to go, but that's what we had to do to adjust to her schedule to make sure that she could continue to learn. She is now an attorney.
Isn't that something? Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, in our case.
He'll do it.
All right, okay. So we have, I think in the early years, we were comparing our system to the school system. So we'd be following a strict routine of 9 till 3, for example. And that became quite stressful. It just wasn't working. And now what we do, rather than having a strict routine, we have a rhythm. I call it rhythm at home. So we know it's Monday to Friday, we're learning, we have a system in place. So my eldest, who's neurodivergent, he has a system he follows, and he wants to do what he needs to do. It causes anxiety if he doesn't. So we allow him to do that. So we follow his lead with that. And then we just kind of work in the afternoons. So I don't think we really, if we follow a routine, it's going to be overwhelming as a whole family. So we have a rhythm, which works wonders because we know work has to be done, but it's when they're ready and when I'm ready. So we don't put that pressure on ourselves for learning at a certain time anymore. But in the early years we did, and it wasn't healthy. So yeah, that's what we do.
So I have 4 children, and although we only kind of probably realised in the last couple of years that they were neurodivergent, they've been home ed from day one. And we've become just a little bit of we've naturally become a bit of a learning community, I suppose. So they're all very different, and they all have very different learning styles. I was similar. One of my sons didn't want to write until he was at 10, he was kind of writing a couple of sentences, wasn't interested. And now at 15, he's 100,000 words into a novel that he's written, and he's just taken his GCSE in English literature. So yeah, just doesn't, none of it adds up really, does it? They get there in their own time. So it's quite interesting because on a day, they will all be doing slightly different things. So I don't really teach them. I don't feel like I teach them. Somehow, Florrie's about to go to college. Joe's taken some GCSEs. We talk lots. They have access to things. So my 9-year-old does lots of cardboard engineering. So when you were talking, he designs. He's got this big racing car. He's built out of things, and if he needs help, he will seek it out. So he might go to his big brother. He might go to me. He'll look stuff up on YouTube. And so they all, my second child's son, who's 15. He is a reader and a information absorber. So he will just turn up next to me. I'll be washing up and he'll say, "Oh, I was just listening to this really interesting podcast all about North Korea, blah, 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 blah," and I'm like, I do not know what you're talking about. I'm learning from you, which is incredible because he self-generates his learning. He comes and talks to me, and that's because he's most definitely autistic, it's really important for him to develop all those social skills. So what he gets from me is he'll tell me things he's learned. He'll tell me about things he struggles with. We will talk it through. We'll discuss things. He'll say, oh, it really annoys me when humans do this and I don't like it. And so we have these really big conversations. So I am teaching them. I'm facilitating them, I suppose. So it's quite lovely that they will come to each other. They will support each other. So in fact, when you have, I think it's the whole thing with parenting. If you have one child, you only imagine what it's like to have one child, and that's how you raise them. But when you have more, they don't get so much of your time as if you had one child, but they get each other. So it balances out, doesn't it? So we're kind of raising each other, I think.
So I hear you say focus on their strengths, facilitate their learning in their timing, and provide opportunities like finding those history bees. If you were absorbing all of that history in the novels, find a way of making that happen. This son that couldn't see everything on paper, but he had a tremendous eye as a photographer. So I found competitions for him to enter his photography. One thing I would add is don't put limitations on what their future might be. I never dreamed that my son would go to college, but when he asked if he could enter his photography in the scholarship competition for the university his brothers went to, I wasn't going to say, son, your ACT is not nearly high enough to get accepted into that university. But when he won the photography scholarship, do you think they were worried about his ACT score? No, they wanted that student. And he graduated in 4 years with a B average, A's in all of his art, and C's in everything else. But hey, he did it. So what is the time? I left my phone down there. So I want to thank you so much for your attendance, and they are available for you if you have other questions, and we appreciate you being such a great audience.